Hello and welcome to my show, Shuvra Deb with you, with me, your host, Shuvra Deb. In this show, I will be discussing mental health with the aim of raising mental health awareness in our community and in society as a whole. The genesis of the show is my own pivotal life-changing experience of being in a Category 5 hurricane back in 2017. That experience led me to suffer from post-traumatic stress disorder, or PTSD. I am hosting this show in order to let you know that you are not alone if something life-changing has happened to you from which you are struggling to heal. Shuvra Deb with you focuses on a range of topics relevant to mental health and to raising awareness of issues surrounding mental health. Hello everyone and welcome back to Shuvra Deb with you, where I help you to prioritise and look after your own mental health and that of those you love and care about. As you all know, and for those of you tuning in for the first time, my show is about raising awareness around the topic of mental health. I want us all to be living in a society where looking after our own mental health and the mental health of those we love and care about is no longer stigmatised, as is currently the case in society. I want us all to live in a world where we no longer make that distinction between mental and physical health, and where each and every aspect of our health is considered in an inclusive and holistic way. Whilst my show is about raising awareness around mental health, I do want to make it clear at the very outset that I'm not a mental health professional and I'm not a medically qualified doctor. If you need to seek professional help, I wholeheartedly encourage you to do exactly that. And we have a good number of options here in the Cayman Islands where you can reach out for support. Infinite Mind Care provides counselling services and can be reached on 926-0882. The Alex Panton Foundation offers support to people up to the age of 30, and their website is alexpantonfoundation.ky. The Wellness Centre here in Cayman can be contacted on 949-9355. Loud Silent Voices provides mental health support. Their number is 922-3847 and their email info@lsv.support. And as always, I love hearing what you guys have to say about my discussion topics, so please feel free to reach out to me on my email shuvradeb82@gmail.com. That's SHUVRADEB, the numbers 82@gmail.com. For those of you listening live on the radio on Bobo FM, if you've missed any of my previous episodes, please do head on over to my podcast, which you can find on Spotify, Apple and Google. Just search Shuvra Deb with you. The with you is spelled WITHYOU. My discussion topic today is how we all have what I call the negatives and how we can tame those. So what are the negatives? When I say the negatives, what I'm referring to is all the ways in all the areas of our lives where we as humans talk negatively about and to ourselves. I spoke about negative internal mind chatter on my 4th show called The Power of Language. On that show, I discussed some of the ways in which we might have internal negative chatter. In other words, how the words we use in our own heads, in our thoughts to talk of and about ourselves, can often be our own worst enemy. For example, we fluff something at work, something relatively minor that we fix right away. But having made that fluff, we berate ourselves and beat ourselves up on how talentless we are or how careless we are and how we should never have fluffed up in the first place in the way that we did. When we do this to ourselves, we forget the fact that for every minor error that we might make in our lives, in whatever context, there are probably around about 100 things that we get right, 80 ways in which we help other people, 60 ways in which we make someone smile, 40 ways in which we make someone feel good about themselves, and 20 ways in which someone close to us feels loved and cared for by us. However, somehow, that one minor error has just taken over our whole brain, our entire being, and has become an obsessive pattern of thinking. That one minor transgression has mushroomed into a monster over which we are now obsessing. As I've said on previous shows, our human brains are instinctively wired towards negative thinking, the purpose of which is to keep us alive, and survival is of course great. But the negative side of that, the downside of our survival instinct, is that, bearing in mind we have up to 60,000 thoughts a day, out of those 60,000 thoughts, the National Science Foundation has identified that around 80% of those thoughts are negative. 80%! I don't know about you, but that sounds pretty horrible and stressful to me. Ethan Kross, in his book Chatter, says of the downsides of internal mind chatter, chatter consists of cyclical negative thoughts and emotions that turn our singular capacity for introspection into a curse rather than a blessing. It puts our performance, decision-making, relationships, happiness, and health in jeopardy. We think about that screw-up at work or misunderstanding with a loved one and end up flooded by how bad we feel. Then we think about it again and again. We introspect, hoping to tap into our inner coach, but find our inner critic instead. Kross describes this inner voice dichotomy as an inescapable tension of the inner voice as both a helpful superpower and destructive kryptonite that hurts us. So how do we turn the kryptonite into a superpower? Well, let's first identify some of the areas where we might have negative internal mind chatter. I've made a list of some of these areas, but this list is by no means exhaustive. So here is the list of some of the areas in our lives where we may have the negatives. We're not clever enough or don't have the intellectual ability to achieve something. We're not good parents. We're unattractive and have a negative body image. We have unhealthy thoughts around food. We're not effective as a boss or a leader. We're a terrible employee. We're not a good partner to our spouse or significant other. And then there's the negatives when we are trying to start or complete a project or a piece of work. These are just a few examples of the negatives. The list can go on and be much longer. So what can we do about these negative thoughts? What are the solutions? One of the solutions to the negatives is to reframe our thoughts, switch our perspective, flip our thinking. By making it a habit not to overthink, not to have the negatives, we form a new pattern of thinking. A study found that it takes roughly, on average, 66 days to form a new habit. That's roughly 2 months, and that figure is within a range. According to the study, some people are able to form a habit in just 18 days, which is less than 3 weeks. How cool that in less than 3 weeks, you could be having a really positive internal life experience where your brain will be telling you nice things about you rather than bashing you. So here are alternatives to some negative thoughts that we might have. If we're struggling in the gym and we're thinking, my legs feel weak, try, my legs are hurting because they are getting stronger. If we're worrying about a presentation we're about to give and we're thinking, the last time I messed this up, it was so embarrassing, try, I've had more practice at this and I will be doing it differently this time. Whilst out running, we're thinking, my lungs are burning so bad, try, I've pushed through the threshold of this lung burn before, and I'm doing it again. We're questioning our intellectual abilities and thinking, I'm not clever enough to work this out. Try, I can work out any problem when I put my mind to it. I can research, I can think, and I can find the solution. We're beating ourselves up for not being a good parent. Try, being a parent is one of the hardest jobs in the world. I am doing my best, and that is good enough. When we're feeling unattractive or have low self-esteem around our body, try drilling down to why you feel this way. Is it because society has put an expectation on you on how you should look? Are you comparing yourself to other people? People who may have had cosmetic surgery and place filters over their photos on social media? Also, try a gratitude practice. One I always go to is thinking, what is the one thing that someone with ill health wishes they had? They wish they had their health. So if you have a healthy functioning body, feel gratitude for that. Rather than focusing on areas to criticize, turn that energy into gratitude for having a healthy body. Which leads on to, what are our thoughts around food? The next time you have a bag of chips or crisps or some biscuits or ice cream and you're thinking, oh, I shouldn't have eaten that, try, I'm so glad I was able to enjoy that bag of chips or crisps, biscuits, ice cream, whatever it was. And then if you want to change up your diet, and by that I mean nutritional intake, not self-punishment, then start exploring the options on what you can eat that comprises a healthy and balanced diet. To the F45ers out there, I have spoken about the F45 Challenge app on previous shows and the wonderful healthy and filling recipes on the app. Go check that out or something similar. For what it's worth, one of my favourite snack recipes are the chocolate protein brownies, which you get to eat mid-morning 5 days in a row. Amazing. What if we're feeling like we're an ineffective boss and we're thinking, I'm a terrible leader and I wish I was better at this? Try to identify what it is that is making you feel that way. What is the root cause? Are you micromanaging your staff? Do you feel you're not being understood? If micromanaging is the issue, take a step back and tell yourself that you can trust your team. You hired them after all. Give them regular check-ins, and in the space in between, let them get on with it. Let them get creative. And who knows, your expectations may well be exceeded. Do you feel like you're not understood? If so, maybe look at how you're communicating and with whom. Not everyone will respond to the same communication style, so maybe modify the way you communicate according to the needs of each of your team members. On the flip side of that, you may be thinking, I'm a terrible employee and I need to get better at this. Are you consistently late? Do you defy everything and everyone around you? And do you not do any work? If you answered yes to these, then you're probably not going to get Employee of the Month anytime soon. But if you're someone who is simply having doubts about your performance, for example, ask to sit down with your boss or another supervisor and have an appraisal. Or go ahead and appraise yourself. Identify your strengths and weaknesses and work with those. Another area where we may have the negatives is about our romantic relationship. Are you constantly scrolling on your phone? Are you always out and you never make time for your partner? Do you constantly criticize them? If that's the case, then maybe that's something to look at. If, on the other hand, you're feeling disconnected from your partner, let's say, try something like going for a walk together and seeing where the conversation flows. Or try taking a class together, whether that's cooking, wine tasting, or pottery making. Then, we can have the negatives around starting or completing a project or a piece of work. In other words, procrastination, where we negotiate with ourselves out of doing a particular task. The key with this one is to recognize that more often than not, once we start the task or continue with something that we have already started and let fall to the wayside, starting it or picking back up on it is not as bad as the image we build up in our minds about how bad we think it's going to be. Another solution to the negatives, and in fact to many of our issues, is one that I speak about a lot, and that is to calm down our nervous system, and to do that by way of yoga or meditation practices. One of the reasons these practices are good for stopping the negatives is that in the process of meditation or practicing yoga, we are forced to focus on our breath. And when we are focusing on our breath, we are focusing on the present moment. It's difficult consistently to breathe in and out slowly and deeply, and at the same time have negative thoughts that cause us to feel stressed. Some of the negative thoughts may remain in the back of our minds, but the focus on breathing will start to induce a state of calm into our bodies, bringing down tensions and stress levels. I've spoken about the roles of our SNS and PNS previously, particularly on my second show, Standing Still to Move Forward, and it's worth repeating what I said. It's especially relevant in the context of negative thinking patterns. Chances are, when you're speaking or thinking negatively about yourself or about the way you handled a situation, those thoughts are causing you to feel stressed. If your negative thought is, for example, that you messed up today in raising your child because you raised your voice at them over something benign, and you're ruminating on those thoughts, reliving that exchange, that experience of rumination and reliving is likely going to make you feel stressed. Every time we react to an event that is even mildly stressful, what is happening, assuming we have the correct levels of cortisol in our bodies, what is happening is that our sympathetic nervous system, the SNS, is releasing cortisol and other hormones into our bloodstream. In other words, we are getting ready to deal with the stressor by activating the fight, flight, freeze or fawn response, which comes from the amygdala located in the nape of our necks. This is what kept our ancestors alive when the flesh-eating bears would run at them or the saber-toothed tiger would come looking for its next meal. That ancestral part of our brains, whilst extremely useful in real-life emergency situations such as a car accident, a natural disaster or some other like emergency, whilst useful in keeping us alive, it activates whenever there is anything going on to which we might react with the stress response. For example, your partner has come home from their day. They're feeling stressed out by something that happened to them that day, and they end up taking it out on you and they shout at you. They probably regret it straight away, but it's what's happened now. At being shouted at, you will either go into fight mode, ready to fight and shout back at them, or you will get ready to flee the unpleasant situation, or you will freeze, hoping the situation will go away altogether. Irrespective of which reaction your nervous system goes into, your body's SNS is dumping cortisol into your bloodstream. Once the stressing event passes and we stop reacting to the stress, our parasympathetic nervous system kicks in, the PNS, and has the effect of calming us back down. Quite often in PTSD sufferers, the PNS ceases to act properly, and so the PTSD sufferer remains in a constant state of hypervigilance, seemingly overreacting to apparently benign events, or in some cases hypovigilance, on the face of it not reacting at all to something that the general consensus may consider to be a stressful event. By being still and pausing through the practices of meditation or yoga, we are programming our parasympathetic nervous system, our PNS, to kick in, and to kick in quickly, effectively allowing us to be the rock standing sturdy as the waves crash about around us. By practicing stillness regularly through yoga or meditation, our PNS gains the ability to self-regulate our stress reaction, bringing us back to a state of calm more quickly than would otherwise be the case. Cindy Dale, in her book, Energy Healing for Trauma, Stress and Chronic Illness, describes the PNS as the calming and de-escalating part of the nervous system. The PNS works with the SNS being the part of the nervous system that is the excitatory and activating part. Dale states in her book, when prompted, the SNS immediately triggers the production of excitatory hormones, chiefly adrenaline, noradrenaline, and cortisol. This initial hormonal blast-off is called the stress response and triggers the flight, freeze, fight, and fawn reactions. I've previously talked about the fight or flight response in the context of suffering a trauma event. However, activation of that response is not just restricted to trauma events. Dale puts it really well. She says, the nervous system's stress response can be triggered from an external event, but it can also arise because of internal circumstances, such as an upset stomach, or, and this is the key, a nagging thought. That response, that brain reaction of fight or flight also kicks in when we're stressed. As I say, when we're experiencing stress, the body releases the cortisol hormone, preparing us to deal with the stressing event. The Mayo Clinic sets out the other effects of cortisol on our bodies once it's released into the bloodstream. It states, cortisol, the primary stress hormone, increases sugars, glucose, in the bloodstream. Cortisol also curbs functions that would be non-essential or harmful in a fight or flight situation. For example, a non-essential function when in fight or flight mode is hunger. When our bodies are undergoing a stressful event or situation, or there are thoughts swarming in our minds giving rise to feelings of stress, there is cortisol coursing through our bodies. If this is happening, say, at or just before a mealtime, we may not feel hungry. We may therefore not eat lunch. We may therefore not eat dinner. We may even be telling ourselves that we do not have the time to eat lunch or dinner, or that we're too busy dealing with whatever it is that is stressing us out. I remember this exact situation a few days after Hurricane Irma. Our timings on everything were wildly off. So much so that one of us declared that they would get lunch ready, and so off we all went to help. Mercifully, we still had some generator gas left at this stage and could therefore fire that up and use the stove. Once the food was cooked, we sat down and started eating some spaghetti bolognese, I think it was. And someone happened to glance at their watch. They said, "Guys, we're eating lunch. Do you know what time it is?" None of us knew what time it was. It's 7:30 in the morning. So not only was this shared experience of extreme stress causing us to act in strange ways, but I recall clearly, I was struggling so hard to eat that meal, so hard. I just wasn't hungry, and all I could feel was this tightness in my throat and chest, making it really difficult to get the food down. I also recall my wonderful friend very kindly sitting with me and coaxing me to eat, like you would a baby or a small child. Just one more mouthful, she would periodically say, and I would do as she said. A few days later, after evacuating, my friend and I spoke about that meal. She said to me, "You do know that we sat for 2 hours, me trying to get you to eat." She could see that the anxiety, the stress, the cortisol, and everything else had caused me to stop eating, and she was worried for me. Whilst that is an extreme example, missing meals, feeling unable to eat is not uncommon to us at times of stress, and sometimes everyday stress, such as needing to meet a deadline at work, for example. Any nutritionist, doctor, or physical health specialist will tell you that skipping and missing meals is very bad for us. But not only that, the release of cortisol when we are experiencing stress, the Mayo Clinic tells us, alters immune system responses and suppresses the digestive system, the reproductive system, and growth processes. This complex natural alarm system also communicates with the brain region that control mood, motivation, and fear. Once that stressing event is over, what should happen is this. Dale states in her book, once the crisis is over, the body returns, or is supposed to return, to the pre-emergency state, relaxed via marching orders from the parasympathetic nervous system. However, long-term and intermittent stress or really acute problems stop the PNS from kicking in. So, you have the SNS that gears you up to deal with the stress. Then you have the PNS that calms you back down. But in people suffering chronic stress, the PNS ceases to function well. Therefore, the part of the nervous system, the function of which is to re-stabilize the body after a stressing event, ceases to do its job in extreme or chronic situations. This means that the parasympathetic nervous system starts to lose its ability to bring the body back down from that high awareness state from the stress response. What this can then give rise to in sufferers of chronic stress is a number of possible body and mind reactions, including anxiety, depression, headaches, problems with the digestive system, and problems related with sleep. Being able to regulate the parasympathetic nervous system manages stress. If the regulation of the PNS is working well, the risk of other health problems will be reduced, and we will generally have a better sense of wellness, both physically and mentally. And this is why some kind of yoga or meditation practice, I think, is essential to anyone living in the modern world, dealing with all of the stresses that we are confronted with on a near daily basis. Whether that's being cut off in traffic or being shouted at by someone or experiencing the internal mind chatter, the negatives, and ultimately stress from ruminating on our busy schedules or the anxiety before a difficult meeting. We all face these stressing events on a daily basis. So, in my view, we all need to find ways to regulate our nervous system in order to be able to deal with these daily stressors and be healthy mentally and physically. Not make the stressors go away because the events will always be there, but to react to those stressing events in a way that does the least damage to the equilibrium of our mental and physical health. In the words of Thich Nhat Hanh, it is very important that we relearn the art of resting and relaxing. Not only does it help prevent the onset of many illnesses that develop through chronic tension and worrying, it allows us to clear our minds, focus, and find creative solutions to problems. And it is through practices such as meditation and yoga that we can reconnect ourselves with the art of rest and relaxation. And it is by resting and relaxing that we get a handle on the chronic overthinking and the cycle of the negatives. And it is by doing that that we start to reduce our stress levels. Another solution, which I've spoken about before and will talk about again because I want you to know about this as I think it will help you with the negatives, is to take positive action around the negative thought or thoughts. And this can be done by using the toolkit contained in Ethan Kross's book called Chatter. This toolkit, in Kross's words, reviews the different tools that exist for helping people resolve the tension between getting caught in negative thought spirals and thinking clearly and constructively. The first of these tools is to use what Kross calls distanced self-talk. He describes this in the following way. One way to create distance when you're experiencing chatter involves language. When you're trying to work through a difficult experience, use your name, i.e. the third person, and the second person you to refer to yourself. Doing so is linked with less activation in brain networks associated with rumination and leads to improved performance under stress, wiser thinking, and less negative emotion. As part of this, it's a good idea to remember that nothing lasts forever, including difficult situations. The adage, "this too shall pass," is a very useful one at difficult times, and try telling yourself that in the second or the third person. The second of Kross's tools to combating negative self-talk, or the negatives, is to see a situation as if you're advising a friend. Cross suggests thinking about the advice we would give a friend if they were in the same situation as the one we might find ourselves in. This should help to turn any negative self-talk into positive words of advice. We very often treat a friend much more kindly and with much more compassion for a situation that they are in than we would treat ourselves in the very same situation. We are usually much less hard on our friends than we are on ourselves. Without that, we probably wouldn't have very many friends. But why are we not more friendly to ourselves? The person we live with, the person we live as every single day of our lives. Surely we should be the most compassionate to ourselves. And seeing things from the perspective and view of offering advice to a friend in the same situation will help us to achieve a better, more balanced perspective of our own about ourselves, prompting us to speak well about and to ourselves. The third tool in Cross's toolbox is to broaden our perspective. Cross says that chatter, or the negatives, involves narrowly focusing on whatever issue or problem we are facing. A good way to get out of this narrow way of thinking is to broaden our thinking or our perspective. One way of doing this, Cross suggests, is to think about how this experience relates to other adverse events that we have faced in the past and have come out the other side of. In my view, another way of broadening our perspective, allowing us to step outside of the negatives, the rumination, is to be empathetic towards ourselves. If we've received some bad news, for example, or we are in the middle of dealing with a difficult and unpleasant situation, however that situation came about, we need to have compassion for ourselves and be able to tell ourselves that it's okay to feel sad or angry or hurt or lonely or whatever it is that we're feeling. And in the midst of that, we must try to remember that better times will come. I particularly like this one about broadening our perspective. Thinking back to a time when we had to deal with something else that had happened in our lives that was unpleasant, maybe even just downright horrible, and remembering that whilst it all sucked and it hurt, and it may have even cost us money, a relationship, or something else, or lots of things, that in spite of all of that, we still got through it. We're still here now to think about it and to tell the tale. This tool about broadening our perspective particularly resonates with me in the context of a video by David Meltzer, which is on his Instagram feed. Meltzer is a speaker, author, and entrepreneur, and his purpose in life is to make 1 billion people happy. That life mission is just so lovely. In this Instagram post, Meltzer asks the question, what are the 4 things that we all take for granted? What are the 4 things that we all need in our lives, and when we have those things, it's all actually eventually all going to be okay? Number 1, food. 2, water. Number 3, air. And 4, sleep. Meltzer is quoting Deepak Chopra when he says this. As soon as we have those 4 things in the context of a safe environment, it's all actually going to be okay, eventually. And the reason that this one resonates with me so much is down to the personal experience of living through Hurricane Irma, which I've spoken about before, and in some detail on my 1st and 6th shows. Being in that situation with dwindling food and water supplies, sleeping some nights with doors and windows missing, that's pretty heavy. So now, no matter how bad I'm feeling about something that might be going on, I try to look back at that experience and know that if I can get through all of that, then I can get through anything. And we all have something like that, something that happened to us in our lives. And if not directly to us, we know someone else who's been through something really tough, possibly even something really horrible and terrible. And we see that that person got through it and they're doing okay. They're hopefully doing really well in spite of their adversities. So that's the perspective I invite us all to adopt, to know that better times will come. So the way to pull ourselves out of the negatives, one of the ways is to reflect on a past situation, either your own or someone else's, where the bad has passed and things have turned out pretty good. The 4th tool that Cross proposes is to reframe the experience as a challenge, saying that we possess the ability to change the way we think and react to our experiences. Whilst we have no control over the experiences and events that are external to ourselves, or to how someone else may behave, what we do have control over is how we react to an event and how we think about a situation. One way in which to aid our inner voice, Cross tells us, is to reframe the situation, event, or experience as a challenge as opposed to a threat, and to see it as a challenge that we will overcome, even if this is the biggest and hardest challenge we have faced to date. The next tool that Cross invites us to try is to reinterpret our body's chatter response. This is not dissimilar to what I was discussing earlier about activating the PNS as soon as the SNS has dropped our body into releasing cortisol due to a stressing event. The PNS being the part of the body that balances that cortisol release and brings us back to a state of calm. Cross says of this, the bodily symptoms of stress are often themselves stressful. When this happens, remind yourself that your bodily response to stress is an adaptive evolutionary reaction that improves performance under high stress conditions. I refer to our ancestors who had to fight the saber-toothed tigers. Cross says, in other words, tell yourself that your sudden rapid breathing, pounding heartbeat, and sweaty palms are there not to sabotage you, but to help you respond to a challenge. To this, I would add, remind yourself to take some deep breaths when you find your body reacting to stress brought on by the negatives or by something else. By breathing into the stress, we calm down our nervous system, relegating the stress reaction out of our system. In the words of Eckhart Tolle, be aware of your breathing. Notice how this takes attention away from your thinking and creates space. Another tool in Cross's toolkit is to normalize the experience you are going through. I touched on this one a bit on one of my previous shows, I think the Valentine's Day special, where I talked about self-compassion and self-love. I said then that life is not perfect and neither is it fair, and that this is a fact that all of us as human beings have to deal with. So when something goes wrong in our lives and we jump to the why me refrain, we jump to the conclusion that we are alone in our suffering. And by doing that, we are isolating and dissociating ourselves from each other and from our shared human experience. We are taking ourselves out of the common human experience that we all go through. By normalizing the experience of what we are going through, by being aware that it happens to everyone, or something negative, some form of suffering happens to everyone, it gives us perspective, and it also reconnects us to each other and to each other's experiences and sufferings. Cross's next tool is to invite us to engage the mind in mental time travel. What Cross means by this is imagine yourself 1 week, 1 month, 6 months, or even 1 year from now. How do you think you'll be feeling about the thing that has just happened or about the situation or event that is causing you to be stressed or to have the negatives? It's likely that in a week it might still hurt. Possibly even after a month you may still be feeling the sting, depending on what the situation is, of course. But in a whole year from now? Again, depending on what the situation is, there will be a lot more time and distance between you and the moment you are in when experiencing the negatives. Whilst I don't agree with the maxim that time is a healer, what time does allow is the opportunity to do something about what has happened, about what we're feeling. It affords us the chance to reflect. If it's the end of a romantic relationship, for example, look at why it ended. Were you incompatible? Did you fail to connect at a true and therefore meaningful level? Or were you just simply on different paths and therefore not aligned with each other? Meltzer has a great post on this one too. He talks about all the rejections he received his whole life. Of these rejections, he says that he was rejected by around over 20 girls whom he'd asked out on dates, until one girl said yes. And the one girl who said yes is his now wife. By visualizing ourselves in the future, by seeing how our future self is going to be feeling, we are switching a difficult situation or event on its head. We are doing this by viewing it from the future. We are changing our thinking and therefore quietening the negatives on that situation, approaching it from a more positive perspective. The next tool that Cross invites us to try in order to turn the negative self-talk around is to take a fly-on-the-wall approach to our situation. Cross says about this that whilst we view ourselves from the perspective of the fly on the wall, or another way to view ourselves is as if we are watching ourselves in a movie, whilst doing this, we should try to understand why our distant self, that is the movie version of ourselves, why that distant self is feeling the way they are feeling. Not dissimilar to showing ourselves compassion and empathy, the fly on the wall or movie character approach allows us to speak kindly to ourselves once we show ourselves empathy, which in turn allows us to gain an understanding of why we may be feeling the way we are. For example, we're feeling angry because a co-worker shouted at us over something minor and then apologized straight away, but we're still ruminating on what happened and still feeling angry. Is that because the interaction made us feel small perhaps? Or perhaps it made us feel unappreciated? Or maybe we somehow felt violated. Whatever the reasoning is behind that negative feeling, it will be easier to discern and identify and therefore to deal with once we have gained an understanding of why we are feeling the way we are. Another of Cross's tools in his toolkit for getting rid of the negatives is that he suggests writing expressively, also called free writing. MIT's Global Languages Department tells us that free writing is a strategy that was developed by Peter Elbow in 1973. It's similar to brainstorming or having a brain dump. So rather than stopping and thinking about what you are writing, just write down almost as a stream of consciousness whatever comes to you. Free writing allows your mind to flow and your pen or laptop to record that flow of thoughts and ideas as they develop and land on the page or the screen. How this feeds into Cross's tool of writing expressively is that he suggests we write about our deepest thoughts and feelings surrounding a negative event or experience, and he suggests doing this for 15 to 20 minutes a day for up to 3 consecutive days. Cross points out that this is an opportunity to really let ourselves go, not to worry about spelling or grammar or sentence structure, and just to write. One of the advantages of free writing over a negative experience, feeling or situation is that it helps to externalize the event, rather than keeping our thoughts, feelings and emotions surrounding that event bottled up inside of us. And once everything we are feeling about this situation or feeling is out and dumped on paper or on screen, it helps to get rid of the negatives and it helps us to start to move on. In the words of Lewis Howes, take some time today to clean your inner house of negativity and celebrate who you are right now. The biological, natural survival instincts aside, what are some of the other reasons behind negative thought patterns, behind the negatives? For example, might we be envious of someone for what they have or what we think they have? Could our upbringing and things that were said to us as children be affecting our current adulthood thought patterns? Have we been conditioned by society to think a certain way about certain aspects of our lives? Could it be something to do with the expectations we are putting on ourselves? Or are we comparing ourselves to others? Are we being compared to others? Has some of the toxicity present in media shaped our thinking? Do we have insecurities that haven't been addressed as yet? Or are we lacking the commitment or the drive to do something because of our fear of failure or our own lack of self-worth or self-belief? Chances are it could be one or more of these factors that are causing the negatives to percolate in our minds, or it could be a combination of all of these factors. Let's look at some of these, starting with envy. First, though, let's identify the difference between envy and jealousy. Envy is that feeling when you want for yourself something that someone else has. In other words, someone else has something that you would like for yourself, whether that's a nice house, dress, or life. Jealousy, on the other hand, is a reaction to something that makes you feel threatened with loss. For example, you see your significant other dancing with an attractive person. You may feel jealous of the person they are dancing with because you fear your partner dumping you and going off with that person. Jealousy can be an indication of insecurity around the situation that is causing the jealousy. Staying with the example of seeing our partner dance with someone else, perhaps if we were cheated on in a previous relationship, we feel threatened by the fear of it happening again. Envy, on the other hand, is desiring something for ourselves that someone else has, and it may come with feelings of resentment towards the person who has that thing or attribute. But the more benign kind of envy, where we see a material possession or character attribute that someone else has and wish it for ourselves, is something that actually has the capacity to galvanize us into action. Turning envy into fuel to achieve success for ourselves is something positive that we can use for our own self-improvement, our own self-empowerment. So rather than letting that envy become destructive, where we end up ruminating on what we don't have and resenting the other person what they do have, we can make those feelings of envy work for us. For example, we can view the feelings of envy as feelings of admiration instead. Besides, envying someone else their achievements or attributes and then resenting them for those is not going to get us any closer to having those things for ourselves. All those feelings are doing is creating negativity in our own lives, having absolutely no impact whatsoever on the other person, and having no positive impact on us. Admiration, on the other hand, is a much more positive emotion. It's also an emotion that encourages us to be more like the person we admire. For example, do you admire someone who seems to have it all? A great job, good looks, a nice car, a great house, a great relationship, other skills perhaps and abilities. We all know someone like that, right? Well, one thing I can almost guarantee to you about that person is that they work hard, probably really hard. If they have a great job, they worked hard and toiled to get there. Great house and car, they probably worked hard and saved money for those things too. Good looks? Maybe they won the genetic lottery, but I can tell you that they probably exercise hard, eat well, get enough sleep. So use those feelings of envy as your fuel. Use those feelings as fuel to turn the envy into admiration and to succeed and be more like the person for whom you feel the admiration. Following on from envy or even jealousy is another situation where we may be experiencing the negatives, and that's where we might be comparing ourselves to other people. If that is what's going on, we need to ask ourselves where that has come from. Quite often, comparing ourselves to others will be something that has been ingrained in our minds from our early years. Parents comparing us to siblings, or in my case, it was often posed to me, "Why can't you be more like this cousin or that family friend?" These things were of course said with the best of intentions, my parents wanting me to succeed in life and get good grades or eat more vegetables. But hearing those words as a child can be very damaging to confidence and self-worth. And sometimes those things can stay with us into adulthood. There are also expectations influenced by media, which we are surrounded by now on a 24-hour basis due to television and adverts and social media and smartphones. Various studies have been done in recent years on the correlation between one's own views on body image and social media use. The common theme running through most of these studies is that the more the social media post is focused on the person's image as opposed to character traits or achievements, the more of an impact those kinds of posts will have on our views of our own bodies. The simple solution is to have a social media clear out. Unfollow accounts that have a disproportionate bias towards body image and start following accounts, for example, where personal growth is encouraged. So, for example, instead of following accounts that have posts of photos of men and women with toned bodies due to their efforts in the gym and with their nutrition, follow accounts where the focus is, for example, on the meals that are being eaten or on the number of reps being done in the gym. And if you are triggered by certain body image photos, stop looking at these types of photos. If you feel that your upbringing or societal conditioning may be causing you to compare yourself to others, then try to drill down into what exactly is the root cause and where it comes from. This is something that you will likely want help with in the form of a professional counselor or psychologist who will have a whole host of tools to help you with these kinds of issues. For example, a professional can lead you through a hypnotherapy session, taking you back to the moment you received the stimuli of comparison and reacted to it. Once the root cause that triggered these feelings of inadequacy, insecurity, negativity have been identified, we can start to undo the patterns we may now find ourselves looped into. And in the famed words of Dr. Seuss, remember, today you are you, that is truer than true, there is no one alive who is youer than you. So stop comparing yourself to anyone else and never forget your uniqueness and what you have to offer. Have any of our negative thoughts arisen as a result of the expectations we put on ourselves? And the negativity lies in feelings that we haven't met our own expectations. Let me say that again. Have any of our negative thoughts arisen as a result of the expectations we have put on ourselves? And the negativity lies in feelings that we haven't met our own expectations. If you identify with that, then again, drill down to the root cause. Where did these expectations that we have of ourselves come from? None of us were born declaring, I've let myself down because I'm not a civil engineer, or I've let myself down because I didn't run the marathon in 4 hours 15 and it took me 4 hours 20 minutes instead. Where do these expectations actually come from? Is it our own voice speaking to us, or the vestiges of someone else's expectations of us? Either way, do we even identify with those expectations, or are we in some loop of thought pattern that we just haven't broken out of? It was expected that Harvard professor Richard Alpert would become a medical doctor. This expectation came from his family, even from other Harvard professors. Instead, Richard Alpert became a psychologist, and then he became Ram Dass, one of the greatest teachers to the Western world of yoga, meditation, and many other techniques. You see, what you expect of yourself that came from what was expected of you can sometimes become your greatest evolution, as was the case with Ram Dass. So by letting go of the expectations we place on ourselves, wherever those have come from, we can evolve into something that perhaps we had never even thought of or expected for ourselves. And that is freeing, liberating, and empowering. The fourth and final reason I would like to explore as to why we may have the negatives, whether that's negative self-talk or just general feelings of negativity towards ourselves, is, are we lacking in drive and commitment? Have we become so demotivated that we have talked ourselves into the negatives and we've become stuck there? But before I talk about the negatives from that perspective, another cause could be an illness, such as depression, anxiety, or something else. If you think that that might be what's going on, or even if you're not sure and would like to talk to someone for some help or guidance, please reach out to your local National Mental Health Helpline or to your GP or your local counselling service. If, however, you have identified, and with absolute certainty, that you are not suffering an illness and you are lacking in motivation for other reasons, the first thing to do is to identify why. What are the reasons that are causing you to lack drive and motivation? It could be any number of reasons. Have you become stuck in your life, doing the same things day in, day out, going to the same places over and over? If that sounds like something you relate to, you could try changing things up a bit. Take on a new hobby maybe. Reach out to and reconnect with an old buddy with whom you've not spent time or spoken for a while. Do something to get your energy flowing again, to get you out of that stagnation that you're feeling, that you're stuck in. Your something new could be as simple as taking a walk around your neighbourhood in the evenings after dinner each night. Another thing you could try is my 15-minute rule. Pick something new that you would like to do, or pick something you would like to complete, something you started some time ago and didn't finish perhaps. Then, for 15 minutes a day, every day, work on that project. Maybe it's learning to line dance, or learning the steps to a dance from a song that you like. It doesn't have to be something that changes the world, just a small something that's different to your day-to-day that gets you excited and interested and gets your energy going and flowing. If you're feeling demotivated because you're feeling overwhelmed by the long list of tasks you need to do, make your to-do list fun. Purchase a colourful diary or book with colourful subdividers in it, or find a cool new organisation app that assists you in getting organised and jazzing up your to-do list. Or, are you feeling demotivated because your body isn't getting the right nutrients from your diet? Could you be drinking too much or not sleeping enough, all of which will give you brain fog and make you feel sluggish? If so, start with having one fewer drink than you would otherwise, and going to bed half an hour earlier than you would otherwise, and gradually build from that. Perhaps you're working on something that you just don't feel like finishing, but you have to. If that's the case, try promising yourself that for every 45 minutes of work done, you'll go for a 10-minute walk, or you'll allow yourself to scroll social media for 10 minutes, and then you'll get back to the work. Breaking up projects and work tasks into these sizable chunks provides a much easier and clearer way to get the job done. Having said all of that, Very Well Mind, an online mental health resource, states, if your motivation remains low for 2 or more weeks, seek professional help. You may also want to seek help if your lack of motivation is affecting your daily functioning. For example, if you aren't able to go to work, your performance at work is suffering, or you can't get motivated to leave the house, this could be a sign of something more serious. Schedule an appointment with your physician. Your doctor may want to rule out physical health conditions that may be affecting your energy or mood. Your doctor may also refer you to a mental health professional to determine if your lack of motivation might be related to a mental illness like depression. If so, treatment may include therapy, medication, or a combination of both. You may also want to consider an online therapy program to address any underlying issues and tackle your lack of motivation. I leave you with the words of Roy T. Bennett. Don't be pushed around by the fears in your mind. Be led by the dreams in your heart. If any of the topics that I have discussed today have affected you, please reach out to someone, whether that's a friend or a professional. Infinite Mind Care here in Cayman provides counselling services, and you can reach them on 926-0882. The Alex Panton Foundation offers support to people up to the age of 30, and they can be found at alexpantonfoundation.ky. Loud Silent Voices provides mental health support, and you can reach them on 922-3847, and their email is info@lsv.support. Tune into my show, Shuvra Deb, with you every Thursday at 2 p.m. right here on Bobo FM 89.1. And for those of you listening on the podcast, which is available on Spotify, Apple and Google, for you guys, if you want to catch my show as it drops first on the radio, be sure to tune in. You can find me online every Thursday at 2 p.m. on Bobo FM 89.1 at dmsbroadcasting.ky. Thank you for listening. See you next time. Bye for now. The Shuvra Deb podcast is inspired and brought to you by Shuvra Deb. Copyright Shuvra Deb. Thank you all so much for tuning in and for listening to Shuvra Deb with you. And please do tune in every Thursday at 2 p.m. on Bobo FM 89.1 for more topics related to and relevant to mental health. If any of you would like to reach out to me directly about any of the issues I've discussed, please do email me at shuvradeb82@gmail.com. That's spelt SHUVRADEB, the numbers 82 @gmail.com. Thank you so much for tuning in and listening.